Good evening and welcome to DHARMA IAS. We are going to discuss UPSC Mains PSIR second paper analysis discussion. Okay, so briefly we'll go through the questions. General observation, almost 23-24 questions out of 28 are from current affairs or from the newspaper articles, different platforms like ORF and Ministry of External Affairs. So my suggestion is, please keep reading newspapers, at least the Hindu and Indian Express. That is required. Okay, don't skip that. So section A, first question, very surprising. Discuss the psychological approach to the study of comparative politics. Fine, no issue. You will get at least 1, 2, 3 questions every year, surprising questions. Fine. That is 1A. Next, neoliberalism, lighten neorealism, dark view of international politics. Then explain the non-traditional security threats in the context of food and environmental crisis. 1D, discuss the political socialization of open and closed societies, static question. Comment on the static in the sense from the comparative politics. Comment on the red lipstick movement in the context of feminist rights. This is again surprising, specific question, but it was also in the news. Okay, in the context of Trump, return of Donald Trump in the White House. Then 2A, the world currently has been in the throes of twin process of democratic backsliding and democratic backlash. How would you explain this paradox? Again, this topic was also in the news last year, also in the Hindu. This article was there based on this democratic backsliding and democratic backlash in the context of Bangladesh, in the context of India, Pakistan. You can read. Next one is 2B. Again, this was purely current affairs on the democratic situation. Then again, this is again current affairs. In 2025, Donald Trump's decision. The withdrawal of the United States of America from the WHO is said to have far-reaching impacts on global health. Reimagining the existing WHO is vital for the global health agenda. Same, current affairs. Then transnational actors have qualitatively transformed the world by the way of their fresh insights and actions. Illustrate your answer with suitable exams. Okay, examples. Fine, no issues. Current or static also. Transnational actors. 3A. Of late, centrist and center-left political parties have been facing setbacks, while center-right parties have been in ascendancy the world over. Comment. Again, very current affairs. I mean, you have to be in a position to understand the elections, political parties, at least 10-15 countries, at least I would say, in the sense 2 to 3 countries from South Asia, 2 to 3 countries from Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America, because question is for 20 marks, so it requires data. Then next one is very static. Collective security and responsibility to protect, R2P, are similar but different in scope, goals and methods. Explain. Okay, very easy, very static. Then C, global south sensitive model of globalization would prevent the danger emanating from over centralized globalization. Discussion. This is on globalization. Static, would say. Fine. Next, 4A, Latin America has made moderate success in countering US-led global economic order by forming various organizations, emphasizing regional sovereignty, economic integration, and alternative development. Mark the word moderate success. Again, very surprising, but we have to attempt or discuss. Fine. 1B, how successful has the ASEAN plus 3 been in addressing regional problems? Support your answer with specific examples. Okay, I can on the regional grouping ASEAN. That is fine, no issue. इतना कोई surprising नहीं है. Then C, Trump's return to the White House is a jolt to push the European Union to invest in its own defense and economic and technological revival. This is UPSC has taken directly from Macron. Okay, Emmanuel Macron, President of France. Okay, his statement is this. Uh, then section B, very dynamic. Again, trust me, in Dharma IAS test series, we covered everything, all these bilaterals, intelli answer writing, and as well as test number 2, test number, then test number 6. Okay, most of the questions on the same line. You can watch my analysis of Dharma IAS test 2025 mains test series. First question, China's growing footprint and tangible shift in power dynamics in Bangladesh has weakened India's leverage in DHARMA. Very straightforward, current based last 2 years, 3 years development in Bangladesh-India relationship. And of course, earlier China's footprints in Bangladesh. Then in the context of Pakistan, would you agree with the contention that India's inclination to lean on a more aggressive, hyper-realist posture has gained a new momentum in the aftermath of the Pahalgam terrorist strike? Comment. Pahalgam, Operation Sindoor. Based on this also, we covered 2 questions in the test series. Okay, you can check that. Test number 2. Then once 5C for India, a multipolar world order would also mean a multipolar Asia. Again, this was also covered. Multipolarity is in flux. Pankaj Saran article, Raju Bhatia's article I have shared on the group. You can check that. Based on that multipolarity and all that. Next one is also, does the non-alignment movement have any future in the wake of India's growing indifference towards this? This was also in the discussed and covered, NAM and India. 5E, historical ties between India and Japan grew into a special strategic and global partnership. Again covered, Japan, India. Next one is very interesting, very good. Question number 6A, critically analyze the different phases of India's foreign policy since independence. How justified do you think is H. Jaishankar's classification of the current phase as the phase of energetic diplomacy? If you Google this question, directly taken by the UPSC, from H. Jaishankar's address at 4th Ramnath Goenka lecture, I think 2019. Okay, so directly from that lecture, where H. Jaishankar has classified different phases of India's foreign policy from independence, since independence. I think 6 phases, phase 1, 2, 3, 4, and last one is energetic diplomacy, whatever it means, 4, 5, 6. Or you can, no need to go in that way also, you can apply your own knowledge. Based on that also, you can attempt this question, very easy. Also, we discuss in the test different phases of India's foreign policy. 6A. 6B, India remains or maintains strong ties with countries that will assure a free and open Indo-Pacific and guarantee greater connectivity with the rest of the world. Analyze. Again, this was also covered in the discussions and news. Okay, Indo-Pacific or India's Indo-Pacific vision. Fine. Next question. C, the tariff threats have pushed India and the European Union closer. Evaluate the India-EU relationship. Again, this was also covered. Then next question, India-EU, discuss in the test and all that. 7A, again this was on the in the context of India's strategic autonomy and US pressure. Okay, this one again in the context of India-Russia relationship and United States position on strategic autonomy of India. 7A. Again, this was also in the news. Already last year also I shared one article, India's strategic autonomy in US. 7B, again WTO and Trump's or the unilateral imposition of reciprocal tariffs. So this was also in the news. Non-alignment 2.0 underscores India's unique aspiration to emerge as a site for an alternative universality. Trust me, this was in the news. Of course, in 2012, The Hindu, there was one article on the non-alignment 2.0. At that time, that book was published, Non-Alignment 2.0, written by various Indian strategic scholars, thinkers, T.B. Mehta, Shyam Saran, Nandan Nilekani, and all those people. Okay, so that time article was there in the Hindu. UPSC has asked questions on non-alignment 2.0 at least 3 times. I think in 2013 that question was there, around 2018 around that question was there, and again this year UPSC asked the document non-alignment 2.0. We will discuss. 8A, India's reluctance to pursue any existential threat inevitably made the multilateral path to nuclear security a default option until it decided to cross the nuclear Rubicon in 1998. Identify, analyze some of the major reasons behind this shift in India's position on the nuclear question. Again, very good question. Discuss some of the key drivers of India's new interest in Africa, which might help in developing long-term comparative advantage over China. Almost on same line questions was there in the DHARMA's PSIR test series. You can check. I think test number 2. Then last, this one is again very surprising. That is fine. India, China, and Nepal. We'll discuss this. Okay, potential in the context of cooperation. Overall, paper is really good questions, really dynamic. You need critical thinking analysis. Oh, so we'll start the discussion. Okay. First question. Discuss the psychological approach to the study of comparative politics. Okay, so you can start with comparative politics, CP. You can mention after. Define CP very easy, directly comparison among the systems, political parties, and etc. Governments, institutions. That is comparative politics. But this psychological approach, again, very surprising. But you can decode this. Psychology means studying the behaviors or studying, analyzing the values, norms of the people, countries, societies, etc. So almost you can mention behavioralism in the comparative politics. Okay, so certainly this is against traditional approach, psychological approach, traditional approach. Like traditional approaches like institutional, historical, or constitutional approaches. Okay, psychology studies different personalities. So it is interface of psychology and politics, studying psychology of individuals, etc. So based on that you can write this answer. Okay, so you have to apply your own understanding to decode this particular question. Okay, role of individuals, civic culture, Almond and Verba you can mention. Okay, so you in that way you can address this psychological approach. Fine. Then neoliberalism lighten neorealism dark view of neorealism's dark view of international politics. Okay, so neorealism versus neoliberalism. Fine. Neorealism. You can start with neorealism if you want. You can mention Kenneth Walls, international politics or international theory, anarchy. International politics is anarchical, self-help, survival is important. Okay, so Kenneth Walls talks about, we can say, maximization of security, and in that context, arms race and etc. Human nature excludes. So neorealism gives, we can say, a dark view of international politics, arms race, and pessimistic view on human nature. very less scope for the international institutions like WTO, United Nations. So that is neorealism, you have to write that. But against this neorealism, neoliberals like Kevon and Joseph Nye, they talk about, we can say, building institutions, cooperation in the context of economy. Liberal institutionalism also we can mention, like WTO, IMF, World Bank. Through that, cooperation can be there, and once globalization spreads across the world, there will be interdependence. It can be complex interdependence. You can mention. So complex interdependency, both you can mention. So that is, we can say realism or plus neoliberalism. So in that way you can conclude. Understood? Very easy. Straightforward question. Next question. Explain the non-traditional security threats in the context of food and environmental crisis. Again, very easy this one also. UPSC has added extra words here in the context of non-traditional security. So that is food and environmental crisis. Okay, so first we have to mention traditional security. Or you can start with security. Security again very contested concept in the political theory, political science. So for traditionalist like realist scholar, security means territorial integrity, sovereignty. Morgenthau, Kenneth Waltz, and etc. You can mention that. And that's why they talk about hard power, arms, weapons, nuclear, and etc. That is traditional notion of security, and to maintain that, they have prescribed some measures. Realist school, even Kenneth Waltz, neorealism, etc. Against this, and they talk about preventing wars, etc. by putting weapons like balance of powers and etc. In that way, they talk. That is realist. But these non-traditional security threats, they became very prominent post-Cold War, we can say. Non-traditional security means, apart from this realist approach, non-traditional security like food security, water security, environmental security, climate security, etc., etc. All that you can, even this cyber security and all this. So human security, you can mention feminist angle here, feminist angle. So these people, feminists and these non-traditionalist scholars in the context of security, they are saying that for long international relations or politics focused mainly on this traditional security. But if you see the impact of non-traditional security threats, the damage is much greater than these traditional threats. So deaths in the context of health crisis, food crisis, and climate crisis. So you can bring data also. You can mention WHO, you can mention World Food Program, you can mention all those climate related reports, IPCC, UNICEF, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, etc. to substantiate your answer. So according to this traditional security analysis, the deaths are high rather than this military threats, other than military threats. We can mention because of food and environmental crisis, there will be migration and internally displaced people, IDPs, and because of there will be clashes or crisis. You can mention that Arab or North African countries face some ethnic issues, some climate related issues, and food related issues. Because of that, migration was happening, and Mediterranean Sea, they were passing through this Mediterranean, and many European countries put restrictions on that. So that issue you can mention. Because of that, there will be many crises in the world. The crisis in one country may impact another country. You can mention even in Gaza, Israel context. In that also, food security issue was there. So these issues are prominent according to these non-traditional security threats. Especially feminists, they talk about human security like Angie Tickner, you can mention. So what is required? We need to focus on this conventional security as well as non-conventional security, that is non-traditional security. That should be our approach. That can be your conclusion. Fine. So you have to substantiate your answer. Explain. Then next, discuss the political socialization of open and closed societies. Again, this is comparison compared to politics. You can start with political socialization. Okay, definition. Socialization. So, in the context of political socialization, you can mention structural functional approach of Gabriel Almond and Pavel. Okay, so through socialization, people get, we can say, internalize values, political system, and etc. So they become aware. They start taking part in the politics and etc. So that is the socialization, political socialization, and in that family, schools, society, even organizations, government organizations play the role. Okay, so you can start with political socialization. Through socialization, structural functional approach talk about all these institutions like schools, family, all these play an important role in the context of socialization, and it is again ongoing process. Okay, so in that way, individuals develop their belief system towards the political system and etc. So that is political socialization. You can mention in the introduction. Structural functional approach. Now there are different approaches to study this political socialization in the context of open and closed societies. Open societies means Western societies, Western liberal societies. You can mention USA, European Union, etc. So there is freedom of speech and expression, free media. Okay, individualism is there. So their process is different. Political socialization different. Against this, we have closed societies like Russia, China, then North Korea. Their state controlled media is there, state controlled schools are there, and there is no, we can say, scope for the political parties, alternative political parties or opposition. Because of that, their socialization, political socialization is different. So you have to mention those topics here. You can add scholars like Karl Popper, even Habermas, coffee clubs, etc. to discuss your answer. So approaches are different in the context of closed societies and open societies. Fine. You can mention various scholars here. Then next, comment on the red lipstick movement in the context of feminist rights. Red lipstick movement. Okay, this was started around 1900 in the early years of the 20th century in the context of suffragette movements in the West, right to vote and etc. And feminists were talking about basic rights like right to vote, civil rights. Later on in 1940s, they started talking about issues of fascism and atrocities committed by the fascism during World War II. So this red lipstick symbolizes, we can say, confidence or rejecting regular norms, practice norms of patriarchy. Okay, so that is the importance of this particular color, red lipstick. Why right now this topic is in the news? Because once again, when President Trump came to power in 2025 and when he took the office, White House, then Oval Office, there he made one statement: there will be only two genders in the USA, okay, male and female. So he excluded transgenders. In that context, this red lipstick movement once again became prominent. So that was the context of this particular question. Okay, so you can mention that. Understood? In that way, you can address this particular question. Next question, 2A. The world currently has been in the throes of twin process of democratic backsliding and democratic backlash. How do you explain this paradox? So, on the one side, we have backsliding, democratic backsliding. On the other side, we have backlash also from the citizens. You can mention that. Now, define backsliding. Okay, so backsliding means suppose there is a country, democratic country, but right now that democratic in that country democratic institutions are not working properly. That is, there is an erosion of democratic institutions. So that is backsliding. That means the essentially the democratic backsliding means when there is a democratic setup, but that democratic setup is not working properly, and then we can say there is a backsliding. Suppose there is a country which is not democratic. It doesn't matter whether that democracy is working in that way or taking new shapes. We cannot say that there is backsliding. To have that black backslide, there should be some democratic setups, at least elections and etc. If those institutions are not working properly in a democratic way, then we can say there is democratic backsliding. So we observed in last decade in different parts of the country or world, there as there is an issue of democratic backsliding. That is rise of authoritarian state, rise of, we can say, or polarized politics, erosion in institutions like separation of power and etc., or rigged elections. Elections are not taking properly in different parts of the world. So that is backsliding. You have to mention. So you can mention authoritarian regimes. You can mention to extend Russia, because Russia established its democracy, though in not true sense, but in the recent past, there is of course backsliding, no scope for the opposition, etc. Authoritarian regimes, you can mention in Hungary also, in many parts of Latin America. So authoritarian regimes, Erdogan in Turkey. Okay, then polarized politics, even USA, that is polarization. Donald Trump, rise of right-wing political parties. Then erosion in the context of elections, like Bangladesh. Even in some extent, we can say India also, because in the context of oppositions, attacks on institutions like media and free speech and election process. Okay, corruption charges against, we can say, leaders like in Netanyahu in Israel. So all these issues show that there is democratic backsliding. Institutions are not working properly, leaders are not performing, media is under control. So all these points we can mention. At the same time, from the citizens, there is counterattack. That is democratic backlash against this backsliding and to restore democratic institutions. So you can mention example Bangladesh recently, you can mention Sri Lanka, you can mention India also. Why? Because in the in last general election in 2025, people gave, we can say, mandate in the context of, we can say, coalition government and restricted power to the leader. So you can mention even in Pakistan also, there were protests against, in the last decade, you can mention, against the authoritarian regimes. So that is backlash against all this democratic backsliding. So at the same time we have backsliding as well as backlash. This is paradox. This is paradox. So you can mention Samuel P. Huntington, waves, retreats, democratic societies. Fine. So here you have to mention, we can say, examples. Understood? Fine. Next question. The withdrawal of the United States of America from the World Health Organization is said to have far-reaching impacts on global health. Reimagining the existing WHO is vital for the global health agenda. As usual, when President Trump came to power, he in 2025 withdrew from WHO. Why? Because of various issues like political intervention, then corruption, targeting, non-utilization of or the misuse of funds and etc. So he was against particular these WHO institutions. Because of that, he withdrew and he wanted to have an alternative setup. Okay, so USA has Donald Trump decided to come out of the WHO, but at the same time they are having other plans like through World Bank and etc. They are planning to maintain their leadership in the global health system. But because right now WHO is again very prominent institutions, it has regional offices, it has various centers, and it has various programs also. But we cannot certainly substitute these institutions of WHO. So we have to reform this existing particular system, that is WHO. So of course USA's decision definitely going to impact the WHO. So around 25% funding was coming from the USA. So USA was the largest donor or funder of WHO. So definitely it is going to hamper, especially WHO's programs like in the context of HIV/AIDS. The USA was contributing heavily. So these programs going to hamper. And this was happened earlier also. If you remember in 2020 also, Trump decided to come out of WHO. So at that time also, the WHO faced the crisis. But we can mention that also. At that time during COVID, other centers, other regional centers decided to come and maintain that health situation or to contain the COVID. So like in Africa, many regional centers developed to help each other. Even in South Asia also, SARC fund and etc. COVID fund. So that was established. So likewise, we have to tackle this particular issue of withdrawal of USA from WHO. At the same time, WHO has to be reformed. There should be more transparency. There should be more budget from other countries, or that is distribution should be there. Other countries should take part in the budgeting and etc. They should contribute. In that way, we can say revive, or we can reform this WHO, and once again WHO can be effective. Okay, but at the same time we have to mention key local level or local response should be there. Like in South Asia, there should be grouping like SARC fund or any emergency fund. In ASEAN region, there should be local response to any pandemics and etc. And WHO should reform itself in the context of transparency, use of fund and etc. Right? So that way you can tackle this particular question. Then transnational actors have qualitatively transformed the world by the way of their fresh insights and actions. Illustrate your answer with suitable examples. Okay, transnational actors versus, we can say, national actors. Okay, so there are different transnational actors, NGOs, MNCs, and you can mention even some terrorist organization. I mean, these are transnational actors. The question is asking, transnational actors have qualitatively transformed the world by the way of their fresh insight and actions. So we have to focus on NGOs and MNCs basically. Realist school talks about traditional sovereign nation states. But in the context of globalization, we have more actors. That is, we can say, cobweb model, complex interdependence, and in that NGOs and MNCs. So MNCs, global MNCs like Google, Apple, Microsoft, they have played an important role in the context of jobs, making policies, making contribution to the global climate fund and etc., making some treaties also in the context of renewable energy and etc. So in that way, all these MNCs have played important role. So we have to focus on qualitative change or transformation by these bodies, MNCs and etc. NGOs, Amnesty International, Greenpeace, okay. So all they played important role in the awareness of environmental activities and human rights. Even nuclear treaty of 2017, there was one NGO, okay. So uh, global campaign against nuclear weapons, international campaign against nuclear weapons, Germany-based NGO. That NGO played an important role in that particular treaty, treaty on nuclear weapons in 2017 even. So certainly transnational actors played an important role in qualitative transformation of the world through their fresh insights and actions. Even World Economic Forum, that is also an NGO, World Economic Forum. So there was summit and etc. You can mention. Right now, this summit is very important, along with UN's summit or UN conference etc. World Economic Forum. Okay. Even at United Nations framework on climate change, conference on climate change, COP19 and etc. There also all these NGOs play an important role. So certainly they have added insights and actions, and in that way qualitative change or shift is there. You can mention that. Then of late, centrist and center-left political parties have been facing setbacks, while center-right parties have been in ascendancy the world over. Fine. Again, very current affairs question. Question is asking, there is decline. You can start with political parties, Max Weber, Lasky, Edmund Burke. Political party definition. Okay, Lasky, Max Weber, and Burke, Edmund Burke. Now question is asking setback to centrist and center left, but rise of center right parties. Okay. The world war. Again, this, as I said earlier, if you want to attempt this question, you should be in a position to at least add 10 countries, 10 political parties, at least leaders in your answer to tackle this particular question. So first we have to mention key rise of this center right political parties. Like we can mention Republican Party, USA, rise of Trump, in Hungary, in Israel, even in India, in Indonesia, in Philippines, all these countries you can mention ki there is a rise. Even in France also, last year Emmanuel Macron established rightist government in France with coalition with right-wing political parties. Even in Germany also, right-wing political party along with leftist party, they have coalition. We know that rainbow coalition in Germany. Okay, fine. So all these right-wing political parties or leaders you should mention in your answer, at least 5-6 countries. And of course, there is ascendancy, there is rise, there is dominance of these political parties, especially in major countries. Fine. And there is, of course, decline, setback to these centrist, leftist parties. But at the same time, you have to mention ki it's not like that ki all these are losing their relevance. Even centrist political parties are there. Even in France, Emmanuel Macron is centrist, so you can mention that. Even in, we can say, UK, Conservative Party, failed. Okay, and center left political party came to power. You can mention that. Even in Germany also, center left political party is in coalition with right wing political party. In India also, center left and centrist political parties, they got good numbers in last general election in 2024. You can mention Sri Lanka also. Last year, president of Sri Lanka, he is from leftist political party. And in Latin America, we have many countries where leftist political parties or center left political parties are in power. So you have to cover all these points to establish your argument कि of late centrist political parties are on rise, but at the same time comment question is comment, so you can balance कि yes, setback is there for this centrist and center left, but they are still in the game. You can give example UK, India, in Sri Lanka, you can mention in Latin America. Okay, so that should be your answer. Fine. Okay, as I said, you should be in a position to add examples to tackle this particular question. Next question. Collective security, 3B, collective security and responsibility to protect are similar but different in scope, goals and methods. Explain. Fine. Collective security and responsibility to protect are similar but different in scope, goals and methods. So you can start with collective security. Woodrow Wilson, 1920, 1919, League of Nations, then United Nations. 1945, collective security was established through UN Charter. Okay, 7th chapter, Articles 39 to 51, various articles like 42, 43, they talk about collective security through UNSCN, all that. One for all for one. That is collective security. So collective security was designed to maintain peace, international peace and security. And again through the institutions. That is liberal approach. Woodrow Wilson, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and etc. you can mention. And the scope of CS, that is collective security is very big across the globe. Anywhere, if one country attacks another country, it is the responsibility of the global community to stop that aggression. So for example, Russia, Ukraine. So Russia has invaded Ukraine. Now it is the responsibility, collective responsibility of the international community to stop this aggression, to stop the Russia, we can say, for example. So it works on the global level. That is collective security. So it essentially talks about issues between nation states, and it has mandate through UN Charter. That is, as I said, 7th chapter of the UN. That is collective security. Now, collective security was used various times in 1953 Korean War, in Suez Canal in 1956, in 1989, 1991, first Gulf War, 1991 Gulf War. So the intention of collective security is to stop war, and if aggression takes place, to stop that aggressor. So again, it also believes that war requires to stop that particular aggressor. That is collective security. Now come to the responsibility to protect. Now this collective security was in the context of, we can say, establishment of League of Nations, United Nations, based on that sovereignty principle, hardcore sovereignty principle given by Thomas Hobbes, and no intervention in the domestic affairs. This is collective security. Now in the context of post-Cold War, especially 1991-92, there has been various issues in the domestic affairs of the country. especially in the context of genocide, violation of human rights in the domestic affairs from the state. From the state. In that context, emerges the context of or the concept of responsibility to protect. Francis Dane, given by Francis Dane. According to him, the sovereignty is nothing but responsibility. The state has sovereignty to protect the individuals, not take the rights or the violate the human rights. So if state is violating human rights or basic rights of the population or the citizen, in of course in domestic sphere, it is the responsibility of the global community to intervene to protect the human rights, because United Nations primary function is to protect human rights, establish security and of course development. But UN envisages this collective security in the context of sovereignty and in the context of war among the nation state. But what happens when it comes to the state is violating the human rights in the domestic affair? Is it the United Nations responsibility to protect that human rights? Why? Because UN Charter is based on this non-intervention and the respect for sovereignty. So that limitation was there in the context of rising genocides, human rights violation like Rwanda, in Serbia, in many African countries, domestic sphere human rights violation was there in Libya and all that. So in that context emerged this concept given by Francis Dane, responsibility to protect. If the nation state, it is the responsibility of the nation state to protect the human rights, that is state. But if state is failing in that particular duty, it is responsibility of the global community to act in the domestic affairs. So responsibility to protect gives opportunity for the global community to intervene in the domestic affairs of the nation state. And this was again endorsed by the UN General Assembly in 2005 through resolution. So this is the mandate of responsibility to protect. Now again, both this collective security and responsibility to protect again criticized because of their selective use. Fine. So responsibility to protect was used by, we can say, Western countries in Libya, in we can say in some extent by adding resolutions in Syria. But again, this was also criticized because of its selective use. Selective use, responsibility to protect, it is again political issue based on selective, we can say, approach. What is India's stance? India prefers diplomatic solutions, diplomatic intervention rather than military intervention. Okay, so you can mention that. Understood? Fine. Next question. Very easy. This was collective security and responsibility to protect. Similar in the sense what? Both want to protect the human rights, mandate of the United Nations, and scope, goals and methods are different. Next one is global south sensitive model of globalization would prevent the danger emanating from over centralized globalization. Again, this is on globalization and debate on globalization. Globalization is required or not, and etc. Of course, globalization is required, but there are positives and negatives, and middle approach, balance approach. So you can start with that globalization. Okay, you can mention McLuhan, you can mention various scholars associated like Friedman and etc. Anthony Giddens and all those people you can mention in the definition. Globalization, world has become flat, interconnection, social, economical, political integration, Anthony Giddens and all that. You can start. But this globalization, which is based on this Washington consensus led by IMF and World Bank, it has some flaws. Many times it created issues, this Western-led globalization. And it again criticized by various scholars like Professor Ramesh Thakur, Professor of course Joseph Stiglitz, all those people, Thomas Piketty, Even Amartya Sen has also criticized this Western-led globalization, which is bottom-up approach, top-down approach rather, top-down approach, based on Washington Consensus, 1980s, Williamson. Fine, ये फिजिकल डिफिशिएंट होनी चाहिए, स्ट्रक्चरल एडजस्टमेंट में प्रोग्राम्स होने चाहिए, ओके, इन्फ्लेशन कंट्रोल में होनी चाहिए, ओके, IMF बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट क्राइसिस एंड एक्सेट्रा, trade interconnection, liberalization, privatization, that all that you can mention, that is over centralized globalization, shock therapies and all that. So Thomas Piketty, global in the context of capital in the 21st century, has criticized because of this globalization, excessive inequality is there in the world right now. You can mention Joseph Stiglitz in his book Globalization and its Discontent. He has criticized IMF's approach, like shock therapy and etc. He held responsible IMF for the Asian financial crisis, crisis in Argentina in 1980s, crisis in Russia also, shock therapy in 1990s early. Then in, of course, global financial crisis of 2007-8, Eurozone crisis also 2010-12. And because of that, there are various issues from the, we can say, different sides. Inequality, environmental issues, even ethnic issues also. Rise of ethnic issues in many parts of the country, world, social movements, all those issues. Impact of nation states, sovereignty, all that. And reaction to this over centralized globalization. Now, because this is again undemocratic, over centralized globalization, etc., people are arguing that the global south sensitive model should be there of this globalization. We need globalization, but that should be global south sensitive model. Again, you can mention Amartya Sen, you can mention Thomas Piketty, same people, Joseph Stiglitz, and etc., to take into consideration global south issues like climate change, like inequality, food security, balanced institutions like WTO, reforms in WTOs and etc. Cornwall consensus give that recognition. You can mention new approach, new international economic, new, okay. All those points you can mention. And that is required, of course. So to conclude with this, Amartya Sen, we require more globalization, but that should be global south sensitive model. Understood? Fine. Next question. Right. Fine. Next question. For A, Latin America has made moderate success in countering US-led global economic order by forming various organizations, emphasizing regional sovereignty, economic integration, and alternative development. Latin America and USA. Again, very contested topic. USA wanted to dominate Latin America in 1980s, 70s, 90s. US led march in Latin America. But Latin American countries, again, Latin America is very diverse. Multiple arrangements are there. Some countries are authoritarian, some countries are leftist, some countries are democratic, conservatives, and etc. And of course, they have their own unique culture and language also, Spanish and Portuguese, unlike English. So they wanted to maintain their sovereignty, of course, post-colonial World War. Then we can say economic integration and alternative development rather than this US-led development, MNCs and etc. So in that context, they countered through various organizations. Like in 1985 or 1980s, they started establishing various organizations. to economic for the in the context of economic integration. So Mercosur became, or it started working from 1991. 5 countries are there right now: Brazil, Bolivia, and all that. Earlier, Venezuela was also part of this Mercosur, but right now it is not. So you can mention that regional organizations and their intention to maintain their economic sovereignty and of course territorial sovereignty. Then in 2011 around they established CELAC, okay, organization of Latin American countries, CELAC, to maintain Latin American, we can say, social, economic, and political integration in the context of their culture and all that. Right now, it has around 33 countries, barring USA and Canada, we can say. All other American world, both Americas, North and South, they are part of this particular CELAC. So these Latin American countries, they try to protect their sovereignty, economic integration, and alternative development. Fine. So you can mention that, but the success is moderate because of again US's interventions and as I said, ki Latin American countries are not, we can say, uh, they are having different arrangements, different issues, and they are on different paths like Brazil, Argentina, and all those issues you can mention. So success is moderate, but they tried their best. Limited success in the context of NAFTA 1993. Mexico became part of that North American calculation. Then US, Mexico, Canada during first Trump presidency. So again challenges are there, but you can mention that. Fine. That is 4A. Then how successful has the ASEAN plus 3? How successful the ASEAN plus 3 been in addressing regional problems? Support your answer with specific example. So in the test we address this question, ASEAN and various regional initiatives like ASEAN Regional Forum, East Asia Summit, even RCEP also. And in that ASEAN plus 3 also. That is 10 countries plus China, Japan, and South Korea. This group ASEAN plus 3 was formed in 1990s, specifically in 1997, in the context of Asian financial crisis. In Malaysia, Thailand, financial crisis took place. In that context of balance of power issues, balance of payment issue, this organization was formed, ASEAN plus 3. Intention was to promote trade, investment in ASEAN and take the benefits of their market in both way. I mean, all these 3 countries are also prominent and ASEAN is also very prominent. So they believe the win-win situation will be there. We require market, China provide goods and etc. South Korea will provide technology, Japan will also provide infrastructure development, etc. So that approach was there. So this grouping became prominent in the context of economic cooperation and all that. And because of that, only this RCEP developed. Because already they were having free trades among each other, with each other. That is, ASEAN was having free trade with China, then Japan and Korea, and they were again part of this grouping. So RCEP happened. So that is again success of this grouping. Japan heavily invested in ASEAN countries to maintain its leverage economic in the context of infrastructure development. South Korea also invested, and of course China. China is the largest trade partner of ASEAN, and China has various interests in that region. In that way, definitely it provided a platform for the countries to develop their economies and etc. Okay, Chiang Mai initiative, you can mention. This was also part of this ASEAN plus 3 arrangement in the context of balance of payment crisis, currency swap agreement and all that. Chiang Mai Initiative, CMI. But again, issues are there, internal issues, dynamics. Japan, South Korea, they are not happy with Chinese influence, dominance in the region. And major issue is this ASEAN plus 3 is based on ASEAN centrality. ASEAN centrality. So skeptics or critics are saying that because ASEAN holds the cards, other countries are, they are not moving in faster way, or China and Japan, they believe that ASEAN centrality is there. So there will be limitations of the engagements. And ASEAN maintains that centrality. Whatever it will be in ASEAN, we hold the card. That is ASEAN way, ASEAN approach. So because of that, again, issues are there. Then we can say interest of other countries like India, USA, Australia also impacted this ASEAN plus 3 grouping. So that you can mention. Understood? Fine. Then next question. Trump's return to the White House is a jolt to push the European Union to invest in its own defense and economic technological revival. Again, as I said, this is Macron, President Macron. This is his statement. He made this statement in 2025 in the context of Trump's arrival in the White House. In the first presidency also, President Trump wanted to stop that funding of NATO, and he was arguing that Europe's security is not a business of USA. You should take your responsibility, or at least you should commit your funding towards the NATO's operation. That was his stance in the first presidency also. And even at that time, Macron was also saying in 2023-24 around also, he was saying ki, look, we have to take our responsibility. That is security, sovereignty, security, etc. Especially in the context of Russia-Ukraine war. But right now Trump has returned, so it is by default right now, the EU should take larger responsibility, or they should think beyond NATO to establish its security in the region. Because Trump's calculations are different, especially in the context of Russia and Trump, their discussion on Ukraine and all that. These people, France and Germans, they are talking about developing their own security in the context of region. So that is the context. So that requires changes in the EU, because European Union has certain clause in the treaty of 1922, Maastricht Treaty, कि the European Union countries should limit their fiscal deficit or defense budget in that context. So it has to be changed. Without that, there will not be any spending from the EU countries on defense and technological revival in the context of security or defense. So that is the context. And Macron is saying that, look, it is Ukraine's president, or Ukraine should decide its future, not Trump or other country or Russia. So for that matter, Macron and France or other Germans, they are saying that we should regain our control on this security. Europe's future, Europe's sovereignty or Europe's integrity, it should be tackled by the countries rather than exporting that security to the USA or other regional powers or other countries. So that is the context. But that requires immense contribution from the European countries. Again, many European countries are facing issues like, as I said, Spain, Portugal, and Greece, Italy. They are not having good balance sheets. Issues are there. So it is going to be very challenging task for the European Union to take the defense spending and etc. Fine. Then section B. So this was section A. We'll move further. Section B. Question number 5A. Very dynamic question. China's growing footprint and a tangible shift in power dynamics in Bangladesh has weakened India's leverage in Dhaka? Comment. So this is question. Decode the question. China's growing footprint, like of course investment, BRI, port development, then we can say railway connectivity and etc. Of course in defense sector also they are having ties, Bangladesh and China. That is China's growing footprint. Recently that China, Pakistan and Bangladesh trilateral meeting was also there, foreign ministers. And tangible shift in power dynamics. Of course that tangible shift post Sheikh Hasina regime, Muhammad Yunus, okay, interim government. And that government again is not good with India because earlier India supported Awami League, Sheikh Hasina. So issues are there because right wing political parties are they are having issues with India. So influence is there. That is tangible shift in power dynamics in Bangladesh. That is first part. Has weakened India's leverage in Dhaka? So that we have to discuss. According to former National Security Advisor, NSA, M.K. Narayanan, of course it has affected because of India's earlier stance on, we can say, Sheikh Hasina and Awami League, and India has provided shelter or asylum to Sheikh Hasina, and people are not okay with that, Bangladeshi people. So certainly there is a message from the Bangladeshi people. They are not happy with India's approach. Even Tista water issue, that issue is still there. Issue of that CAA already was there, and Bangladeshi issue of post 1971. So issues are there in the relationship, and because of this tangible shift, the relationship going to impact according to M.K. Narayanan. His view is that. But again, it has provided opportunity also. So same question, almost on same line in the test also. We discussed this question. Fine. This particular topic or particular event has provided an opportunity for India and Bangladesh to, we can say, redefine their ties based on equal footing and based on more mature understanding of each other's sensitive issues. So that provides opportunity, you can mention that. For that we require to work with bipartisan manner. We should focus on our own issues rather than domestic issues of Bangladesh. We should focus on engaging with civil society and etc. in Bangladesh. So in that context, Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti argued that India needs to work with all the stakeholders like people, army, and of course this interim government. So that should be your approach of answer. Conclusion, you can mention. Understood? Very easy. Then would you agree with the contention that India's inclination to lean on a more aggressive hyper-realist posture has gained a new momentum in the aftermath of the Pahalgam terrorist attack? Okay, so April 2025 that attack, then Operation Sindoor May 2025, India's action against Pakistan, deterrence by punishment and etc. You can mention. Of course, that is more aggressive, hyper-realist posture. There is no doubt that realism played an important role in the context of post-Pahalgam issue in India-Pakistan relationship. Has gained new momentum in the aftermath of the Pahalgam terrorist attack. Yes, there is no doubt about that. India's approach towards Pakistan, zero tolerance and etc. Terrorist camps, even Indian forces entered in Pak, even Pak occupied Kashmir as well as Pak, and destroy the basis of terrorist organization. That is, you can mention, that is more aggressive, hyper-realist posture. You can mention Nirupama Rao, H. Jaishankar, Sham Saran, etc. At the same time, in the comment or in the conclusion, you can mention that wisdom prevailed, and we can say again, this is again realism. We agreed to ceasefire. Realism, why? Because it is not in the interest of both the countries, nuclear weapon states, to have war. So that you can mention. That is, and along with that, it's not like just more aggressive, hyper-realist posture. we engaged, we implemented other aspects also, like public diplomacy. We can say mention at FATF we try to block Pakistan, and mention or using propaganda also, narration, setting narration also. So along with this realism, we use conventional methods also. Those we be using throughout the time. Along with that, you can mention that also. It will give you, we can say, extra age. Fine. But of course, that realist portrait is there. You can mention Shyam Saran, C. Raja Mohan, everything, even Nirupama Rao. Already I shared many articles on this point of all these scholars. Understood? Very easy. Next question. Moving ahead fast. For India, a multilateral world order would also mean a multipolar world order would also mean a multipolar Asia. Again, on this also, we covered one question. For India, a multipolar world order would also mean a multipolar Asia. Fine, comment. So multipolar world order post 1990s, brief period of unipolarity, and then we have this polarity, multipolarity at global level. We have USA, we have Russia, we have China, we have Japan, EU, of course India, Brazil, South Africa, and all that. That is multipolar world order. Distribution of power, that is world order. You can mention Henry Kissinger in the introduction. So our, of course, approach towards world order is multipolar only. You can mention Shyam Saran, you can mention Samir Saran, you can mention Pankaj Saran, ambassador. You can mention H. Shankar. All these people you can mention. India stands for multipolar world order. That is our belief, no doubt about that. But this is in the context of multipolar Asia. So in the context of China's Middle Kingdom syndrome, India believes multipolar Asia. China believes that world can be multipolar, no issue. We have no issue. We accept that. But Asia should be unipolar, that is led by China. That is Middle Kingdom issue. And that's why China has some ambitions also. BRI, OBOR, South China Sea issue, string of pearls, and etc. That is hegemonic initiatives of China that you can mention. But unlike China, India believes this multipolar Asia also. And that's why we have partnership with across the stakeholders, ASEAN, Japan, South Korea, or then we can mention in West Asia also we have various stakeholders. And India believes that Jambudvipa, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, neighborhood first and all that, Gujarat doctrine, Shyam Saran and etc. you can mention. India believes that multipolar Asia, not any hegemonic power. Okay. So that can be your conclusion. Then, does the non-alignment movement have any future in the wake of India's growing indifference towards this? Again, many times we covered this question in the test, at least 3 times. In test number 2, test number 3, test number 4, and test number 6 also. In first part as well as second part, non-alignment movement. On this line also, we discussed key. Does this non-alignment movement have any future in the wake of India's growing indifference towards this? Specific context, again, late 1990s, relevance of NAM, question by various scholars, C. Raja Mohan, etc. We can start with non-alignment movement and all that, Nehru and all that. But post-Cold War, NAM itself question, relevance was questioned. But in the recent, but post-1990s, Indian prime ministers and Indian establishment paid important or attention towards NAM and all that. But especially during time of Prime Minister Modi, post 2014, India started engaging more boldly with the West, especially USA. And Prime Minister Modi skipped all those summits, NAM summits, during his, we can say, tenure. So he skipped 2017 summits, 2019 summits, and last summit, 2024 summits also. Venezuela, I think Baku, and this 2024 Uganda. All those summits were attended by, we can say, Vice President and Minister of External Affairs. So he skipped 17th, 18th, and 19th NAM summits, Prime Minister. So that shows that India is not interested, or India is not having interest in the NAM. And we started engaging with the West. Not only that, we focused more on the West, or we became part of Western calculations. And alternative also we started developing, like Voice of Global South Summit and all that. So that shows that India is not interested in now. So you can mention that. Voice of Global South arrangement and all that. But conclude with, even you can mention Jai Shankar ki NAM was, or non-alignment was in the context of Cold War, and it has right now. I mean, we should focus on, we can say, strategic autonomy or multi-alignment, etc. So non-alignment was in the context of Cold War. He wanted to project that. But according to Ambassador P.S. Raghavan, NAM or non-alignment as a principle is still relevant, though we have changed the nomenclatures like strategic autonomy, multi-alignment, and even NAM is also important because of its significance in the context of numbers. It is the largest platform, second to the UN. Again, India can play an important role by focusing on global south, and we cannot lose that particular privilege or leverage, in the context of global south. So India should keep focusing on the NAM countries or global south. So you can mention MK Narayan and all that. They believe that India should not leave this particular block. So you can mention those people. Understood? Then historical ties between India and Japan grew into special strategic and global partnership. India Japan, this was also covered, of course. India Japan. You can start with Ambassador Conwell Sipple, okay, cherry blossom phase and etc., or Prime Minister Manmohan Singh or Shinzo Abe. You can start with these people. India Japan, historical ties between India and Japan, historical ties post, we can say, 1950s, even before also uh, Buddhism and etc., that is cultural ties and all that. But post 1950s, Japan provided official aid to India, largest donor, we can say, or largest receiver of that official special aid of Japan. And Japanese people, they invested heavily in infrastructure development, etc. But in the recent past, this relationship grew into special strategic and global partnership. Of course, no doubt about that. At various level, we can say people to people contact has also increased. Trade, especially trade, is around 20 billion, 24, 25 billion. Investment in India's corridors, metros and all that, that you can mention. We are part of multilateral arrangements like Quad, then J, Japan, USA and India. We developed agreements on nuclear energy, space cooperation. Japan provided, we can say, currency swap arrangements in 2013-14 around. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh visited Japan at that time. 75 billion, that currency swap agreement. So certainly that global different at different level relationship increase or grew, but it has also strategic dimensions and global dimension also. Strategic in the sense of Quad and Malabar exercise, that you can mention. And according to Harshvi Pant, you can mention Harshvi Pant. Both these countries, they have convergences in Southeast Asia and other parts of the country because they have no any issues. So they can develop joint programs in Southeast Asia, like in, we can say, Myanmar, in other parts of the Southeast Asia, as well as in Bangladesh also. And they have some projects in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, Asia Africa Growth Corridor, joint collaboration, and India's and of Japanese role in that. So this global partnership, that nature is there, but it has limitations also. What is limitation again? Of course, trade is not that prominent around, as I said, 25 billion, which is not, I mean, significant. If you compare with Japan, China, they have I think 400, 500 billion trade. India, China, 130, 125 crore billion, billion trade. So in that context, Japan is nowhere near to China and all that, or India is nowhere near to China in the context of Japan. So that part you can mention. Even in Asia Africa growth corridor, nothing is happening or no concrete achievements are there. So again, limitations are there, but again, both are democracies, both are vibrant economies. I mean, in the sense, third largest, fourth largest economies, and etc. We can mention Japan uh, requires skilled labor because of demographic changes in Japan. India can provide that. Recently, Prime Minister visited Japan before going to SCO, so that shows the significance of Japan. So you can mention that Japan is again very important. Fine. 6A. Next question. Critically analyze the different phases of India's foreign policy. Critically analyze the different phases of India's foreign policy since independence. How justified do you think is Jaisankar's classification of the current phase as the phase of energetic diplomacy? As I said, this particular statement of energetic diplomacy is of Jaishankar's statement. He made this statement in 2019 Ramnath Goenka lecture. In that lecture only, he classified Indian foreign policy since independence in 6 phases. No need to go in that way. As I said, you can have your own approach. So even this question I discussed in the test. You can just focus like first phase during Nehru phase, that is first phase. Second, Indira Gandhi's phase. In that way you can go. Then 1980s, we can say Rajiv Gandhi, and 90s phase post liberalization, PV Narasimha Rao and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and Manmohan Singh. You can mention 1990s to 2014, and last phase Prime Minister Modi's phase 2014 to 2025. So in that way also you can mention, first was, we can say, idealism of Nehru, as I said. Then you can say realism of Indira Gandhi, Bangladesh war, Pakistan, India war 1971. Then 1974 atomic test, nuclear test, that is realism of, or treaty with USSR 1971 August. Then we have 1980s Rajiv Gandhi. During that time only he wanted to have global connections and etc. He wanted to resolve issues with China. 1988 visit to pragmatism of Rajiv Gandhi, and then of course PV Narasimha Rao, he liberalized economy, that is neoliberalism started in foreign policy. Post that you can mention that, and that policy continued throughout the regimes like in PV Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and then we can say Manmohan Singh also. In that during that phase we established various foreign policies. You can mention initiatives like Act East policy, in that context Low East policy 1992. Then we neighborhood first policy, in that context Gujarat doctrine 1996, 97. All those initiatives you can mention in that phase. Atal Bihari Vajpayee engaged with USA, natural allies. Then of course Manmohan Singh engaged USA, nuclear deal. These are the achievements of all these regimes you can mention. So different phases, but 2014 you can mention, post 2014 paradigm shift has taken place. You can mention C. Raja Mohan, engagement with the West, especially USA, became very concrete. Foundational agreements in defense sector, major defense partners, strategic trade authorization. India became, I mean, part of global architecture like Quad and etc., or regional architecture in that context, I mean Indo-Pacific. Then we can mention de-hyphenation of Israel, Palestine, European Union, we started free trade agreement negotiations. So all these issues you can mention in the paradigm shift in the context of neighborhood. First, activist policy became prominent. So this is Modi phase. You can mention all these scholars: A. Jaishankar, C. Rajamohan, Harshvi Pant, Shyam Saran. A number of scholars you can mention in your analysis. Jaishankar's approach was, he classified Indian foreign policy since independence to present times, 6 phases. Phase was Nehru's phase. He labeled it as, we can say, non-alignment phase because of Nehru's focus on non-alignment. Then he said that the second phase was Indira Gandhi's phase, and during that time, realism trumped and recovery also post 1962. Then third phase, 1990s, during time of Rajiv Gandhi and all that. So he focused that regional assertion of Indira Gandhi in the context of Bangladesh and misadventure of Rajiv Gandhi in the context of Sri Lanka, sending peacekeepers in Sri Lanka. So that was third phase, 1971 to 1991. Fourth phase, he labeled 1991 to 1999. During that phase, India became part of liberal world in the context of new economic policy, and during this phase India tried to maintain its strategic autonomy. So that was fourth phase. Fifth phase was 2000 to 2013. During this phase India wanted to establish a balancer or balancing power. That was fifth phase. And last phase, sixth phase, is 2014 to 2000. We can say right now we are in 2025, so 2025. So that is his analysis. Is this sixth phase is energetic phase of Indian foreign policy. Why energetic? Again, various reforms, various initiatives launched by the Prime Minister Modi. You can mention those. Just I have discussed that. Neighborhood first, activist policy, all those points you can mention. Dehyperination, USA, Japan, Quad, EU, Russia, all this mention you can mention. But question is, we can say, do you think is Jaishankar's classification of the current phase as the phase of energetic diplomacy? That is fine, you can mention that, but you can mention some, limitations also, especially in the context of neighborhood. India faced various challenges in Sri Lanka, in Maldives, in Nepal, in the context of RCEP, challenges from China in the context of OBOR. So you can mention some points where India faced various issues, challenges. Even at the global level also we face challenges at, we can say, WTO and all that. But again, India many times took various decisions to protect the national interest. So fair enough, we can mention energetic diplomacy. Fine. More use of soft power, public diplomacy and all that. In that way you can focusing on diaspora, USAs and all that. Fair enough. Energetic diplomacy. Understood? You can have your own approach. Very simple, very basic of Indian foreign policy. Understood? Next question. India maintains strong ties with countries that will assure a free and open Indo-Pacific and guarantee greater connectivity with the rest of the world. Again, this question was also discussed in the test. 2 questions covered in the test on the Indo-Pacific. Same question, same line in the context of Indo-Pacific and India. So you can start with Indo-Pacific vision of India. You can mention Shangri-La dialogue, Shangri-La lecture of Prime Minister Modi 2018. India believes in open, inclusive, free and rule-based Indo-Pacific. India's approach is Indo-Pacific should be open, rule-based, inclusive and free, and ASEAN centrality. ASEAN centrality. So India's approach is Indo-Pacific is from USA to the Africa. and in that ASEAN is at the center. That is all inclusive. According to H. Shankar, our approach is not to contain anyone. We are not living in Cold War era. We want to have good relations with all the powers. We are not here to contain anybody. That is our approach to the Indo-Pacific, and that's why in the context of Quad we mention this Quad as a security arrangement. It is not an alliance. It is again not a military alliance. And India believes that ASEAN centrality should be there. That ASEAN should be the center of analysis of this Indo-Pacific. And we developed good relations with all the ASEAN countries. Recently, we have security arrangements with or the export of BrahMos missiles to Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia. Also, negotiations are going on. Then we have economic agreements with Australia, New Zealand. Recently, Australia, you can mention South Korea, then of course Japan. All those points you can mention. So that is our approach towards the Indo-Pacific. Even as I said, India supports this Indo-Pacific regional island countries to secure their interests. Small island countries, Pacific island countries, Indo-Pacific island countries, in the context of climate change, etc. So our approach is very inclusive. You can mention Prime Minister Modi, H. Jaishankar, as I said, Raju Bhati also. You can add all these people. Nirupama Rao also. India's approach towards Indo-Pacific is inclusive in nature. You can add these scholars. Fine. Then the tariff threats have pushed India and the European Union closer. Fine, no doubt about that. In the recent past, evaluate the India-EU partnership in that context. Again, context is there. Immediate reason is there. European Union and India they pushed towards each other because of this tariff threats and etc. Because both require, I mean, both India and European Union believe that they have complementarities in various areas, trade, economy, etc. And because of this Donald Trump's, we can say, transactional approach, India has also signed treaty with UK, and next is European Union. But of course, immediate reason is there ki tariff threats and etc. But we started this negotiation in 2024 itself, renegotiated. We started renegotiations on this particular India-European free trade agreement. Last year, foreign or the delegation from European Commission, they visited India, and we started that renegotiations, which was stalled in around 2013. But of course, it is in the interest of both the countries, India, European Union, in the context of economy. So evaluate the India-EU partnership. You can start or you can have this approach, convergences and divergences in the relationship. Convergences, as I said, key economies, democracies, largest democracy, second largest democracy, economies, European Union is again, if you see group wise, second largest economy, India is fourth, fifth largest, whatever it may be. Then we have good opportunity in the context of investment, in the context of people to people contact also, we have good chance. In the context of skills, in the context of technology transfer, technology cooperation, etc. That convergences are there. You can mention scholars like H. Jaishankar. He was saying that India-EU relationship are the most consequential for the world as well as, of course, for the bilaterals. You can mention Ambassador Mukherjee, Bhaswati Mukherjee. India-EU relations are important for the economic sense because both are complementary to each other. So in that way, you can develop your approach to India-European Union convergences. But there are certain divergences also or issues. According to Samir Saran, European Union has more faith in China, and that's why they are focusing more on China. Ukraine issue is also divergence. Recently, European people are criticizing India for the Russian oil and etc. Jaishankar has many times refused their claims or critics on the issue of human rights and all that. European Union has some issues, climate change, climate or carbon tax, they are having some issues, and of course FTA negotiations have started, but again uh, we are waiting for that final deal. This is European Union and India relationship. You can mention scholar, as I said, Jay Shankar, Samir Saran, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee. Fine. Next question, question number 6 or 7A. India continues to invoke its time-tested policy. Seven A. India continues to invoke its time-tested policy of strategic autonomy. Strategic autonomy, independence, autonomy in the context of foreign policy decision making that India has been following since independence 1940s. Even NAM or non-alignment is a strategic autonomy. Vis-a-vis both the United States of America and Russia by rejecting US offer of mediation on Kashmir issue and by refusing to criticize Russia in its ongoing war against Ukraine. This question is framed based on, we can say, US Ambassador Eric Garcetti's statement in 2024 कि in the time of this like war, there is no scope for this strategic autonomy. India should take part of USA's calculation and start criticizing Russia or stop taking oil from Russia. That was his understanding. Eric Garcetti, 2024. So he was saying that ki India's principle of this strategic autonomy is very vague or it is opportunistic, simple way. And India should come out of this label strategic autonomy and all that and start criticizing Russia. But look, according to Jay Shankar, our interests are supreme. India's track record in the context of maintaining strategic autonomy, again intact. We maintain that. Of course, some issues are there, some issues in the past also, but we maintain that strategic autonomy. Nehru maintained that, Indira Gandhi maintained that in some way, Rajiv Gandhi, then of course P.V. Narasimha Rao, I.K. Gujral, all those people maintain in different ways this strategic autonomy. Even today also, though we are part of US calculations in Indo-Pacific, in different areas, I2, U2, and at global level also, we maintain this strategic autonomy with the other people. Like also, as I said, ki we are part of Quad, but we are also part of SU. We are part of I2U2, but we are part of other regional organizations like BRICS or AIIB. Fine. So that is our strategic autonomy, to maintain interest-based relations. Sometimes it was criticized as opportunism and etc., but that is fine. National interests are prime. Realism, Morgan Thue. Fine. In the context of this also, USA was putting pressure on India to stop oil from Russia. Even we faced some sanctions recently, tariffs and etc. But we rejected that and we're still taking oil from Russia. Jay Shankar has argued that, Jay Shankar, look, someone is preferring oil at very reasonable rates, and we require that. It is in the interest of India to take that anyway. And even we are exporting that refined oil to European Unions or European countries, and they are taking from us. So don't lecture us on the Russian and all that. Fine. So you can mention that even in the context of Russia-Ukraine war, India has not criticized Russia, and USA has been arguing that India should start criticizing or at least stop buying oil from Russia. But that is not going to happen. We are still taking large chunk of our need from Russia. Even in the context of Kashmir also, Donald Trump, in the context of Pahalgam, Operation Sindhu, at least 28 times, President Trump argued that he settled that dispute. But officially, Prime Minister as well as S. Jaishankar, officially in the Parliament, said that no mediation happened on the Kashmir issue. That is our stance, and we have to believe the Honorable Prime Minister. So we maintain that strategic autonomy. Though again it was criticized by various scholars and all that. But that is different part. Next question. Trump's unilateral imposition of reciprocal tariffs on scores of countries poses impending threat to the future of the rule-based multilateral global trading system under the WTO. What options do the WTO members have to salvage the organization? Of course, WTO and USA, especially Trump. Again, you can start with WTO, multilateral trade organizations, 1995, 164 members, and etc. Whatever it may be. India is part of that concession-based agreement. So WTO is the best bet because it is based on multilateralism and all that. So that is fine. But Trump is not happy with this WTO because of that. WTO, we have China and India, they are having large surplus against USA. So USA is not happy with WTO rules. That's why some issues are there with WTO and USA in the context of countervailing duties and dumping duties. So USA refused to appoint judge at the dispute resolution body of WTO, and we have paralyzed WTO dispute resolution mechanism or body. Appellate body is not working. So in that context, there is a question of the existence of WTO itself. But again, India should continue, or other countries like India should continue to focus on WTO because it is based on multilateralism, consensus-based agreements, and etc. So which provides scope for the countries. But again, that is also impediments. So some people are arguing that we should focus on plurilateral agreements also. But India's stance is that look, we believe in the original constitution or original rule-based WTO, that is consensus-based agreements rather than plurilateralism. So some people are arguing that we can focus on plurilateral agreements like China's proposal of investment facilitation agreements and etc. There should be new norms, new, we can say, areas, topics like e-commerce and etc. There should be some cooperation. Then WTO should continue to work in the, that special and differential treatment all that. So India still focuses on that, and WTO should, food security and etc. So whatever our conventional stance is there, you can mention that, but you can mention कि WTO requires reforms in the sense कि more new issues should be dealt with consensus along with some reforms also. As I said, you can mention one point that plurilateral, at least mention that. You can take side of India, but mention कि just to end this kind of deadlocks and etc. Some people are arguing that at least we can have that plurilateral agreements. Those countries who believe कि this can go, so just go with that. And other areas you can have your own that consensus based. So in that way, you can mention what options to the WTO members have to salvage the organization. Right? Then non-alignment 2.0 underscores India's unique aspiration to emerge as a site for an alternative universality. So this non-alignment 2.0, as I said, this was the document published by Indian scholars in 2012 by security establishment people from academia. As I said, Shyam Saran, Nandan Nilekani, P.B. Mehta, Rajiv Kumar, all these people were part of that, we can say, document. Very prominent people. And what was the context? It is non-alignment 1.0 versus non-alignment 2.0. Non-alignment 1.0 means from 1945 or 47 to 1991, that is Cold War, and people started raising question on non-alignment as a principle. So these people developed this non-alignment 2.0. There are certain similarities in non-alignment 1 and 2, that is strategic autonomy. This principle continue in that 1.0 also and in 2.0. But in 2.0, they focused various areas and public, concrete solutions or concrete we can say suggestions for the foreign policy makers in that document. Like is focus on China, focus on neighborhood, focus on global centers of power and etc. Focus on multilateral organizations, WTO, UN, and all that. This document also discuss this alternative universality. That is, we have this universal particularist, uh, we can say, arrangement of the West. That is Western led universal world order. That means human rights, rule of law, democracy, and etc. Rather than pluralism or local issues. So this document says that India can provide alternative to this particularist universalist principle of the West, globalization, human rights issues, rule of law, democracy, and etc. And alternative to this universality, India can develop like plurilateral arrangements, country specific or country specific issues. Then we can mention India's approach of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, India's approach towards country-led inclusive solutions. Even in Afghanistan also, we believe that the solution should be Afghan-led and Afghan-controlled and Afghan-oriented only, not external intervention. India believes that key non-interference in the domestic affairs. So that is our alternative to this Western world. You can mention this document as well as you can mention Samir Saran, S. Jaishankar, reform, multilateralism, multipolarity, and all that, norms-based approach, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, all that. Fine. Okay. Moving ahead. 8A. India's reluctance to pursue any existential threat. India's reluctance to pursue any existentialist threat inevitably made the multilateral path to nuclear security a default option until it decided to cross the nuclear Rubicon in 1998. Identify and analyze some of the major reasons behind this shift in India's position on the nuclear question. Now again, this is a very dynamic question. First argument is that, first statement is saying that, you look from, we can say 1950s to 1998, we believed in the multilateral arrangement in the context of nuclear security. That means India stands towards NPT, India stands towards CTBT, India stands towards global arrangements for the nuclear free world. And we refuse to have nuclear weapons. We believe that the world should be nuclear free. The influence of Gandhi, influence of, we can say, Nehru. Though we conducted nuclear test in 1974, Pokhran 1st May, but we declared that we are not nuclear weaponized state. We just demonstrated our capacity to have weapons, but we never made that. And that was peaceful explosion also, smiling Bhutan, etc. We believed at that time also that we require nuclear disarmament, nuclear free world, and this NPT should be universal. NPT should not discriminate have and have nots. In 1980s also, Rajiv Gandhi proposed plan of nuclear disarmament, and in 1996 we were having positive inclination towards CTBT. CTBT can maintain universal disarmament and etc. But all these failed, and finally we decided to have that strategic shift in 1998, and finally we were having Pokhran 2nd in May 1998, 5 nuclear tests, and we declared ourselves nuclear weapon state, Atal Bihari Vajpayee. What are the reasons behind this? First, of course, failed multilateral arrangements. NPT, CTBT, India's concerns were not taken. Second, these NPT and CTBT, they were having, of course, discriminatory attitudes, have and have nots. And India was saying that, look, we need a verifiable, very concrete disarmament procedures, time-bound procedure. But no one listened to that. Then immediate issues like USA's pressure on India, India should not develop nuclear, and India should sign this CTBT in NPT. That was pressure on India in 1990s. Then in 1990s, it was reported that Pakistan was having nuclear, ready-made nuclears from China. That means Pakistan uh, imported nuclear weapons from China. That was in the news. In April 1998, Pakistan uh, tested Ghuri missile. So that was again considered threat to India and mounting pressure on India to sign the CTBT. All these led to the India's decision to test the nuclear weapons. And of course, we lost that nuclear umbrella of USSR in 1990. Discussion in the Indian establishment that we should develop our nuclear weapons. Even Rajiv Gandhi in 1991, when he was in the opposition, asked the president about the nuclear weapon program, and positive, inclination was there. Narasimha Rao in 1995, he wanted to conduct test, but because of US pressure, he declined. Vajpayee also wanted to conduct the test in that brief period of 13 days tenure, but again because his government collapsed, so nothing concrete happened. Even I.K. Gujral, he refused to sign the CTBT during his time. He was the prime minister at that time. Though he signed chemical weapon conventions and etc., but he refused to sign uh, fissile cut-off material treaty (FCMT) and this CTBT. That shows that there was consensus throughout the political parties, left, right, as well as center, to have option of these particular nuclear weapons. And finally, the centrist, center right or rightist political party, that is BJP, conducted the test because atmosphere was in that particular favor. So in 1998, under the leadership of Vajpayee, we conducted that Pokhran second and we declared ourselves as a nuclear weapon state. So these are the various backgrounds of this particular, we can say, shift of Indian foreign policy or India's security policy towards nuclear. Then immediately we declared our nuclear policy or nuclear doctrine. No first use, credible minimum deterrence, then non moratorium on further test and etc. But again, it is part of foreign policy. So these are the various reasons, major reasons behind this shift in India's position in the nuclear question. Understood? India still believes on that particular conference on disarmament. Ki disarmament hona chahiye, but you left no choice but to have this nuclear weapon. So we conducted and we are nuclear state right now. Next question 8B, discuss some of the key drivers of India's new interest in Africa, which might help in developing long-term comparative advantage over China. Again, this was also covered in the test. Key India-Africa relations. These are bottom-up approach rather than top-down. India believes in the capacity building of African countries. That's why we have various programs in science and tech, people-to-people contact, university delegations and etc. Providing ICCCR programs in Africa. Our approach towards Africa can be summarized through Kampala principles of Prime Minister Modi when he visited Uganda, in non-intervention, cooperation, capacity building, mutual respect and etc. So all these are against or contrary to Chinese approach. Chinese approach is considered as more exploitative. Okay, checkbook diplomacy, debt diplomacy, exploitative in nature. We have Asia, India, Africa Forum Summit. Many African countries right now we have direct engagements, new foreign offices or embassies in Africa. Again, India-Africa trade increase and etc. So all these definitely key drivers of new interest in Africa, which might help in developing long-term comparative advantage over China. So China's approach is top-down approach, India's approach is bottom-up approach, African people led. So that's why we have connections with direct in the context of IPSA fund also. Through IPSA fund we developed some concrete achievements in Africa, like in health, education, infrastructure, etc. So India's approach is more people led, and in long term people are saying that, like Ambassador Sachdeva and all those people, though they are skeptic, but they are saying ki India should continue with the approach of people to people contact, but at the same time, Ambedkar Mahesh Sachdeva is saying that ki Africa should also pay attention to us India's sensitive issues in the context of China. So definitely in the long run, it is going to help India. You can mention scholars Seth Jaishankar, Prime Minister Modi, and as I said, Ambassador Mahesh Sachdeva. Understood? Last question. Discuss the potential role India can play in initiating a possible phase of trilateral economic engagement among India, China, and Nepal. Again, this is again very surprising question because we all focus on India, China issues and etc. But this is again very functional, specialized, rather functionalism and etc. Do you think that functionalism will work and all that in the context of Nepal, China, and India? So you can start with this King of Nepal, Prithvi Shah. Okay, Prithvi Narayan Shah's arm between two builders. Nepalese arm between two big powers, China and India. But this arm can become, we can say, bridge, vibrant bridge or golden bridge between two powers if functionalism works here. Fine. So that is the question. The potential from this buffer state to golden bridge or vibrant bridge, this journey, and that India's role. Of course, you can mention that there is scope. Functionalism can work, provided that India and China should trust each other. And it is also possible because of course, we have some issues with China, and but despite that, we maintain good relations in BRICS, AIIB, and even recently, Prime Minister visited SCO. In that context, also you can mention recently. But of course, that time SCO summit, or even last year's Kazan summit also, India and China were having understanding. So though we have some issues, India, China, but Nepal can provide connectivity which is required for both these countries, and in that India can play important role because historical route is this only through Nepal. All these Chinese foreigners in the ancient India came through this route only. Buddhism spread to China through this route only. Fan Yan, Huansang, all these people came through this, and this was again old route, Silk Route and all that. And India was having relations with Tibet only through Nepal at that time. According to S.D. Muni, Professor S.D. Muni, if this develops, this trilateral happens, China, India, and Nepal, India, Nepal, and China, India can have that access, old access of Tibet, and through that Xinjiang, and through that Central Asia. So that is also possibility according to Professor S.D. Muni. Shyamsaran also believes that if we believe in the functionalism, hydroelectricity, then climate change, issues related to environment, etc., Himalayan earthquake and all that, there can be engagement in this sector, especially in the hydroelectricity and especially in the context of water and all that, security. So all these people can have important role. But of course, some issues are there because of China's CP, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and some issues with in the context of Nepal's domestic politics. There are certain limitations, but we can develop this if functionalism prevails in the region. So this can be your answer. Understood? So this is discussion of paper 2nd UPSC Mains PSIR. All the best for the results. Those who have given mains this time, both the papers, paper 1st and 2nd, I have analyzed. Based on that, I can say stick to the basics, keep reading newspapers, focus on reference books also, quality reference book, Andrew Hayward Global Politics, O.P. Gopal Political Theory, and in the context of current affairs, at least read the Hindu, Indian Express, refer MEA and ORF also if you have time. Okay, so stop here. Take care. Thank you for joining this session.